So I'm really excited that we're moving on to this segment of the conference programme now, where I get to talk about this year's Research Challenge Award winner. So before I introduce this year's winner, I just want to give you a little recap as to what this award is. So I mentioned in my initial welcome on the first day of the conference, but if you didn't attend for that, then this will probably be new information for you. So in 2016, I won the first one of these, this Research Challenge Award, and the idea behind it is that the Brainbox Initiative lends an early career researcher some equipment that allows them to pursue an ambitious, novel piece of research that they wouldn't otherwise be able to pursue without this kind of technical support. And previous winners have been able to use this equipment loan to collect data for a period of around 3 months, which then provides them with some really interesting pilot data that they can use for other grant applications or to start other project directions. And I was really fortunate that I was able to obtain another grant on the basis of my Research Challenge Award pilot data, which then allowed me to expand my lab and fill it with great people who I work with today. So what does the award consist of? Well, as I mentioned, it involves some loan of specialist equipment from Brainbox. And this is around a period of 3 months, but there is flexibility in terms of if you're having difficulties with your timeline, if ethics is taking a long time, for example. So don't put up any obstacles or barriers for why you think that would be difficult for you. It also comes with expert technical assistance. And one thing I did say on day one was that for me, this was so helpful, because when sometimes you're trying to set up a new study, you're trying to set up a new lab even, in my case, having somebody at the end of Skype or the end of Zoom to help you and actually look at your setup, that level of technical support is second to none. And Brainbox couldn't have done any more for me during my time when I was setting up my particular project. So that's something that you obviously get as part of this. You'll also receive some financial support as part of the award, and that depends on what type of project you are wanting to do. So if you are testing human participants, and that involves paying an inconvenience allowance or travel money for your participants to come into the laboratory, then that's the sort of financial discussion you could have with Brainbox around getting their support for that. You'll also be invited to come back to one of the Brainbox conferences, which is fantastic, and talk about what happened with your award, where did your research go, and how was the experience and what kind of data did you collect. And not only that, but you'll be welcome to help out with various events, training, workshops that we do, webinars, so lots of different opportunities for you to get involved and become part of the Brainbox Initiative family. So why should you apply for this award? Well, I've already talked about some of the benefits that I experienced, but some things you might not think about are when you perhaps go on to apply for other research funding or other jobs, for example, if you're pursuing an academic position. It's a really good thing to talk about on your CV and also at potential interviews, that you've had this experience of applying for a grant, even though it's not what you might regard as a typical grant of monetary value. It still fulfills that kind of grant application criteria for a lot of people. And actually, I would say that this process of writing the application, which I'll come on to in a minute, and trying to conceive of a project that you can deliver in a short period of time is actually more beneficial for your development as a scientist than somebody giving you a check for a few £1,000s, which is always lovely. I'm not going to say it's not, but this is very helpful for your development of your thinking, development of your grant writing experience, and so on. So it also allows you to potentially move into a slightly different research direction. So a lot of us work within the confines of our PhD topic, or within the grant that you might be employed on, or that you might have written yourself in your postdoctoral research. And this gives you the little opportunity to explore a sideline project, which can be really exciting and intellectually satisfying. So in order to be eligible, you need to be a current PhD student or a postdoctoral researcher within around 5 years post-PhD, but this does not include career breaks for caring responsibilities, parental leave, etc. And your application should be geared around you wanting to work with brain stimulation in combination with a different type of stimulation perhaps, or with a different imaging methodology. So all the methods that you've heard about throughout the conference, that you will continue to hear about, any combination thereof is fantastic, including things like neuronavigation as well. fMRI scanners, not very easy to lend out, unfortunately, so that's not necessarily something that the Brainbox guys can supply you with, but have a discussion with them if you've got questions that you want to consider, research questions, and how you might approach those methodologically. So how do you apply? Great thing about this award is the application process is really, really straightforward. It's a one-page application which has to clearly set out your research question, what you're hoping to do, the timeline of the research, and how that research is going to benefit you and perhaps your wider institution or your lab group as well. So the fact that it is this one-page application is very doable. It's not overwhelming. You can fit that in amongst your graduate or your postdoctoral research responsibilities. It's not like some other types of grant applications which are really quite onerous. And it also involves a brief personal statement that currently you submit through the website, but again, not long and very straightforward application. So what happens then after you apply? Well, as Dan and others have mentioned, the Brainbox Initiative has the scientific committee behind it. So that committee is made up of a number of world-leading brain stimulation experts, from Professor Charlie Stagg to normal early career researchers, lecturers such as myself. And the scientific committee scrutinise the applications and they evaluate them for their scientific quality and what that type of research is going to do for the applicant, and how novel and exciting the research question is. So this year's award, we had a really good number of entrants, and it was a very, very difficult job trying to pick the winner for this year. But there were a couple of features that really stood out to myself and other members of the scientific committee on this year's winner. One was that the proposal had some really ambitious aims, and it marked a new direction in the research for the applicant that would take them from studying at a cellular level to whole body physiology, working with humans. It also presented a really novel and exciting use of transcranial ultrasound stimulation, which the scientific committee were really excited to see. And lastly, it was extremely clear and concise in the way the entrant had formulated their research objectives and hypotheses. In fact, I would say that it was clearer than some of the grant applications I reviewed from much more senior academics. So absolutely fantastically written one-page application, which really for me reflected the clarity and insight of that applicant's thought. So it is my pleasure to announce that this year's 2021 winner of the Research Challenge Award is Ben Clennell of the University of Bristol. So congratulations, Ben. Virtual round of applause from our audience members. And Ben, if you are with us, if you would please do join with your video and your audio and introduce yourself and tell us about what you're hoping to do, what this research will mean in terms of the new directions you're going to follow, and so on. Thank you very much. Ben, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Fabulous.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, so my name is Ben Clennell. I'm a PhD researcher at University of Bristol. As you sort of intimated there in the introduction, my background is more from a sort of cellular molecular side of things. So I did my undergraduate degree in biochemistry and then a master's in molecular neuroscience. And then I chose the PhD project I'm on now, which is looking at kind of the molecular mechanisms of ultrasound neuromodulation. So we work predominantly with cell culture models, but we have plans to do some in vivo animal model work. But yeah, trying to understand what the kind of molecular mechanisms underpinning the effects of ultrasound on neuronal physiology are. Part of the reason, I guess, that I chose this project, my PhD project that is, was because it felt like it would be a good kind of stepping stone in the direction of kind of moving from the cellular molecular background that I come from towards hopefully working with with kind of more whole organism and hopefully human participants. So kind of choosing the project where, you know, I would start working with the cellular molecular assays that I'm familiar with, but the project focus would be on a brain stimulation technique, which ultimately we hope to use in humans. So kind of leads me nicely onto the proposal, which was, yeah, exactly that really. It just seemed like a really great opportunity to take that first step from my project, take some of the findings that we have and try to apply them to human participants. So the title of our proposal was, Can Transcranial Ultrasound Modulate Human Memory Function? So the idea behind it is memory disturbances are clearly a huge issue as people age, but as of yet, we don't really have too many useful tools to treat these disorders. So there have been quite a lot of studies using brain stimulation techniques, whether that's kind of implanted electrodes or transcranial magnetic or direct current stimulation, that have looked to kind of promote memory function, but as far as we could tell, you know, results are quite inconsistent, or in many cases actually kind of negative. They seem to kind of have a negative impact on memory function. And the idea we had was, well, most of these studies, they stimulate the targeted regions during the memory task. And we kind of wondered whether that sort of disrupts the endogenous signaling that's important for memory formation. So some of the work that we've done in our culture models indicates that the ultrasound stimulation can alter the excitability of neurons, and that this effect can persist for quite a few hours after the initial stimulation. So the idea behind this project is that we would kind of use transcranial ultrasound stimulation kind of like a conditioning tool. So we will deliver the stimulation prior to doing any cognitive tasks, and then we'll do kind of verbal recall tasks subsequent to the stimulation. The idea being that if you've enhanced the excitability in the relevant circuits, then we can hopefully kind of promote memory function. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, that's really clear. Sounds really cool. So are you going to start off in kind of young adults looking at memory recall, or might you move to an older population who have memory deficits?
Yeah, so in this instance, I think we'll be starting just with healthy volunteers. So yeah, probably local university population, whichever friends I can get to volunteer themselves. I think it was actually one of the things I found very interesting from one of your presenters on the Tuesday, maybe. I'm afraid I can't remember her name, but she won the Research Challenge Award a couple of years ago. And one of the things she was saying was that she was quite struck by how difficult the ethical approval process was. I think she said she didn't get approval until a year after she'd won the award. And I think one of the things she said there is that perhaps if in hindsight she would have chosen to do a study that just involved healthy volunteers and not kind of older patient populations for reasons of kind of speedier ethical approval. So especially having heard that, I think we'll stick with our healthy volunteers for now, but obviously the ultimate goal is to kind of move into those populations. This project will be done with one of our collaborators who's a clinician here in Bristol. And so she's very interested in kind of progressing in that direction. Certainly.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I totally agree. I think no matter how long you think a project is going to take, it always ends up taking more time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if you're starting with something that's quite new in terms of your research direction, doing something which is perhaps on the young, healthy side of the spectrum before jumping straight into the older, less neurotypical populations is very pragmatic, especially the timescale of the one that you're going to be working with. So will this be your first human-based research project then?
Absolutely, yeah. So I have some very limited experience with EEG, but that's really only been conducted on myself. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Open BCI project. They produce these kind of like commercial, like open source, relatively affordable devices. So I've kind of been trying to teach myself a little bit about how EEG works using one of those. We tried to do some kind of gamma entrainment experiments on myself with some flickering light, which haven't worked out quite so well, but I think that's difficulties getting our lights to work quite as well as we'd like. But that's really the extent of my experience with kind of human studies at the moment. So I'll certainly be working with a couple of collaborators we have here who have a lot more experience with this kind of thing. One clinician and one from the Department of Psychology. So that's great. Yeah.
Are you based in the medical school? Is that correct? Is that your faculty?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I think going from sort of working in vitro to human participants, you'll acquire so many new divergent skills just from that alone, let alone the actual research element and the methodology. So in terms of your PhD, what year are you in at the moment?
So I'm not entirely sure because I started part-time and things like that, but I think I'm relatively early in my second year. So
cool. And have you thought about whether you want to kind of go into a human neuroscience direction or cellular neuroscience when you graduate, or perhaps something totally different?
So definitely I think I would like to move more towards the human studies, more kind of cognitive neuroscience. As I've been doing my PhD, we kind of mainly do a lot of electrophysiology, patch clamp electrophysiology stuff here. And I really love the experiments and kind of really love the projects that I'm working on. But just the more time passes, the more I kind of find myself thinking that doing things in whole brains with people, moving away from kind of the use of animals and these kind of things is where I think I want to be. So it was actually, I'd just been away for 2 weeks on annual leave, and I was kind of thinking about this whilst I was away and thinking about how it's been kind of really difficult to find our way in. So to come back a few days ago and then find out that I've got at least a bit of a way in now.
That's awesome. It's come at a good time.
Yeah.
That's really great. So thank you so much for being prepared to chat to us and talk us through. I know you obviously just found out about this today, and it's not easy being put on the spot and having to talk to conference attendees. But the last thing I just wanted to ask you about really was, do you have any advice for applicants applying for this award who might be thinking about it for next year's round? What might you share with them?
Just go for it. Like, I honestly had no inclination that we might win this, really. I thought our project was a good idea, but I also not being so familiar with these kind of studies and this kind of thing, on the other side of it, I just thought, well, is anyone going to think that that's possible at all, or are we just kind of talking nonsense here? So I think just think of a good idea and just go for it. Like you say, the application process is not so onerous compared to the grants that people have to write. Don't get put off by the idea that maybe you're not familiar with this kind of research.
Perfect. I totally agree with that. I think that kind of mentality, that just go for it type mentality, is really a good one to adopt for lots of things in research and academia. Well, thank you so much, Ben. Obviously I can't present you with anything virtually, but we're really, really happy to be supporting you with this project. I can't wait to see what comes of it, and invite you back to the conference in the near future and see what data you've got. I don't know if Dan wants to say a few words on behalf of Brainbox or not.
Just exactly the same as you, Helen. Congratulations, Ben. Really looking forward to getting things started with you. And as we know from experience of doing this over many years now, and with many different winners, things do take time. But there's no rush to get started. That's the main thing. We can spend plenty of time planning and getting everything lined up, ethics as well as equipment and everything. And hopefully then, when the clock starts ticking on the actual equipment time, it'll be plain sailing into it, we hope. Well done again. Looking forward to it. And thanks, Helen, as well.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you. So